Okay, so I guess many of you, like me, watched at least some of the Olympic Games last month. Did anybody watch? You indicate if you watched the Olympics. I love athletics, and this is an interest probably born of having a brother who was a national athlete. I have to say that a similar passion was not engendered in me by the considerable number of my family, female as well as male, who played football. Football, which is I would say a preoccupation of a major kind in Scotland, completely has passed me by, but I do love athletics. So every 4 years, I'm delighted and inspired by those who run, jump and throw in an attempt to go faster, higher, stronger than their fellows. Or than their own personal bests individually or as part of a team. But I also enjoyed seeing some of the sports I don't normally follow, and some I didn't even know existed. Competition bouldering, anyone? I'm full of admiration for the years of dedicated training and discipline involved in all the sports. And with a great stretch of the imagination, I can see that just probably I could have learned to do at least some of them to a beginner level. They seem within possibility for my human body. But there are a few that I just cannot comprehend. Watching Simone Biles turn multiple somersaults from a standing start, or Mondo Duplantis propel himself over a bar more than 6 meters high with only a slender, bendy pole for support. Seems almost superhuman to me. All the Olympic sports demonstrate for me the potential of the amazing thing that is the human body. But as much, or even more maybe, the Paralympics confirm this potential. It's not only those blessed with physical perfection who can achieve extraordinary things. People who the world has described often dismissively as disabled demonstrate conclusively that given appropriate support, structure and opportunities, they can develop different but equally impressive abilities to the highest degree. But it's not just sport. I remember watching a proms concert a couple of years ago on television that I found just riveting. It was a recording of the Scottish violinist and now director of the Edinburgh International Festival, Nicola Benedetti. And she was performing Wynton Marsalis's Violin Concerto in D. It was a magnificent performance of a great work. I don't know if anybody else saw it. Nicola was wearing a stunning white skin-tight catsuit. International violinists have changed a little. But what really struck me was the physical effort, the huge physical effort in playing music. You could see the muscles ripple all through her body into her arms, and in that a different kind of physical potential was being realized. So, sport, music, different sorts of physical accomplishments, pursuits, achievements. Think for a couple of minutes about physical pursuits that you have engaged in, that you have enjoyed. Just reflect on these for a minute and then talk to the people around you. around about you about them. You're allowed to talk about football.
Oh yeah, that's
about how the
Does anyone want to share their particular pursuit or activity? Oh yes. Yeah.
I was just saying to my friends here that some years ago I spent a month in Western Australia, in Perth, and I went to the beach a lot. Next door to the beach I was on was a naturist beach, and I thought, I wonder whether I dare. Well, I did. And initially, heart pounding, as I sort of wriggle out of my cosy, thinking everyone was looking, but of course they weren't, because everyone was in the same situation. And I loved it. And the interesting thing was the physicality of people didn't matter.
Yeah.
They were all shapes and sizes, and that was a real lesson to me, and that was why I found it very liberating.
Yeah.
Can I just say that I've done the same, done that. And to tell you the truth, the best experience of doing that is going swimming.
Yes, lovely.
It is fantastic to go in the sea,
Yeah.
you know, starkers, if you like. Absolutely brilliant. Can I share something as well?
Yes, of course.
I went to the Edinburgh Festival in this month, obviously August, and we went to see an event, and there was two acrobats, and the lady played the violin the whole way through. So she was tossed up and down, she was going out the other big wheel that they go round in, she was upside down, she was on his shoulders, she was stood on his shoulders, and she played the violin the whole way through, and never missed a note. It was fantastic. And you're talking about human physicality and things like that. Never seen anything like it. Yeah.
It sounds amazing.
It was.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
Anybody else?
Dancing at a wedding. It's about the only time I do get to dance these days, but we were at one in Skipton a couple of weeks ago, and up most of the night when the band was playing, just moving to music actually rather than dancing, if I'm honest. But it's just fun.
In the mystery of birth, we are reminded of some fundamental truths. We are first of all creatures, and when we forget that, we undermine our very existence. We are co-created, a species among species, with a responsibility to respect other forms, for we are interdependent, and they are also part of the divine creation. We are embodied, whole persons, and the human body is to be cherished, not starved or beaten or killed, because God has called it holy. We are located. We have a time and a place. We are a part of history and geography. We are also co-creators. We can create nothing out of nothing, but only in relationship and exchange with the earth, with other people, with God who is always calling us on to regeneration, to bringing forth God's life. In thinking about great sport or great music, I am of course talking about elite music and sport. The majority of the world's population and many countries simply do not have the resources or often the freedom to offer that level of opportunity. The facilities, the equipment, the training, the diet to its people who may equally have the talent, but which talent will remain untapped. It's no surprise that the countries in the top 10 medal table at the Olympics are all high-income countries, though they are very different in other regards. Most of us, I imagine, don't feel anything other than enjoyment of and appreciation for the dedication of elite sports people and musicians, except possibly for a vague regret that we didn't practice harder as children when we had the chance, and gratitude that we can still participate at our own level. I'm really interested that Catherine mentioned dancing, because there's very often a tendency to think of dancing as something that only young people do. And I remember both being in Harare, in a nightclub in Harare, listening to Thomas Makfulo, who's a famous Zimbabwean musician. In this nightclub, it was jam-packed with people attending the World Council of Churches General Assembly of all ages, absolutely, and people of all ages dancing. You know, Zimbabwean women do not put up with any nonsense about being too old to dance. And similarly, I also remember being in Buenos Aires and just walking down a street, and there was a little kind of platform where people were getting up and dancing tango. And this couple, who must have been probably in their 70s, and they got up, and I mean, you could tell that they'd been dancing together probably for 50 years, but they were great. I mean, their dancing was spectacularly good. And just thinking about, you know, the fact that all of us can dance, you know, whatever age we get to. And there are different ways in which all of us can dance, but and I also remember that Rosa Luxemburg said, "If I can't dance, I don't want your revolutions." Our lives and our bodies offer us many other possibilities of fulfillment. But the catastrophic global injustice and inequality of our world is not so kind to everyone. I'm an adopted grandmother for a young Vietnamese couple living and studying in Glasgow. Last year, they had their first very longed-for baby, a little boy. He was born by IVF, something that would not have been available to them so readily in Vietnam. The birth was fine, but Edwin then had great difficulty in taking to breastfeeding. For 6 weeks, which is an extraordinarily long time, his anxious and stressed new mother expressed her breast milk to feed him. The midwives had never met anyone who persisted for so long. But they got there in the end. They did it by following very ancient wisdom. They lay together in the bed, both completely naked, and eventually, skin to skin, Edwin found his way and his instinct and latched onto the nipple. And of course, it was a vivid reminder that first of all, we are animals. And this is one place where following animal instinct has huge health benefits. But though we're all born, from our moment of birth, children experience the world in very different ways. Perhaps that's because there's so much of it. So many people being born, living, dying, in their billions now across the world. So many species, animals, plants, so much inconvenient life. People getting in the way of other people's ambition, greed, beliefs, religion, people who are not useful. Our world and its dominant economic system sets value according to market forces. And they tend to value what's scarce, exotic, has a high utility value. So much of life just seems too common to be worth much, and the world goes along with that. Across the world, women are more likely to be considered of low value than men. A long history of Western theology has viewed women's creation, especially as expressed in Genesis 2, as secondary and derivative, evidence of her inferior status. Woman was created after man, from man, for man. It's not hard to read in this story not only the patriarchal culture which it represents, but also a curious existential envy which has woman born of man rather than man of woman. And yet this passage has been used to justify appalling abuse and oppression. I don't think I have to labour this point in this company, except to say that there are plenty of other patriarchal cultures and religions which have done the same. Who could fail to be moved by the one Afghan woman at the Olympics, denied by her country's leaders as in any way representing them, in a country where women are effectively held in complete serfdom? And in the modern world, this intersects utterly with racism. Anyone who's read any of the recent reports on the outcomes for women of colour in maternity services in the UK will be aware of that. And yet there is an ache of longing here. It is not good for the man to be alone. The desire for a partner, a companion who will accept our vulnerability, the deep-rooted instinct for intimacy, is both human glory and human tragedy. Glory because it calls out all that is best in us, tenderness and delight, kindness and care, genuine mutuality and self-giving, and as with persons, so with peoples. Tragedy because trust is so lightly betrayed, because belonging with so easily turns to belonging to. Almighty God, Redeemer, the sap of life in our bones and being is yours, lifting us to ecstasy. But in the garden that is each of us, always the thorn. But if the desire for human intimacy is both tragedy and glory, for the Christian church it has too often played out as comedy, or at least as farce. Why should homosexuality in particular be such a divisive issue for churches, given the huge global concerns which might seem a more creative focus for the energies of faith communities? Jesus himself said nothing at all about it. Biblical prohibitions are often cited, but these refer to the kinds of practices that are considered equally deplorable for heterosexuals: rape, corruption of minors, prostitution, violations of hospitality, and cannot with any justice be applied to the faithful and loving partnerships of many gay and lesbian men and women. But the traditional view is that teaching about homosexuality cannot be separated from teaching about marriage. As a leading evangelical put it, modern loving homosexual partnerships are wrong because they are incompatible with God's created order, heterosexual monogamy. Since that order was established by creation, not culture, its validity is both permanent and universal. In other words, the problem is not so much being homosexual as being not heterosexual. Homosexual partnership is the most recent and the one that attracts the most instinctive and learned fears about sexuality in a long line of deviations from monogamous, heterosexual, indissoluble marriage or celibacy, which is the only other church-sanctioned option, which includes divorce, pre- and extramarital sexual relationships, cohabitation, single parenthood, and now increasingly the increased visibility and role of transgender people. All of these raise questions about family, gender roles, and the way in which we understand the authority of the Bible and of the church. The phrase, God's created order, heterosexual monogamy, begs so many questions that I feel faint at the thought of beginning to address them. But straight off, it is another aspect of our failure to accept the fact that we are a species among species. That nature, including human nature, does not consist of the simplistic binaries that are wielded as a weapon in the culture wars. And that however devotedly people might believe it, actually it functions as a means of social control. The natural world is so much more complex, everywhere marked by differentiation, and the human species is the same. There are, for example, many millions of intersex people across the world. Are we supposed to say to them, sorry, God made a mistake with you. You're not a proper human being. You're not a man, you're not a woman, you're not a proper human being. We've only just begun to get past saying this to people born deaf or blind. The darker side of the Olympics, or rather of modern mass communication, came into the light when two young women boxers had the most private aspects of their health exposed in a humiliating and shameful way. But to see the not so hidden drive towards social control of women at its most bizarre, and I would say least Christian form, you only have to hear the attempted shaming of single women, especially those who have cats, by a disrespectful man who wants to be the Vice President of the United States. Some of my dearest friends are single women with cats, and they are neither crazy nor miserable. There might even be a couple in this room. It's very hard to see how Christian nationalists in America can think they present an attractive picture of Christianity, given that their modus operandi seems to be one of rudeness, insult, mockery of the weak, infidelity and greed, and their programme for government seems to be based around not feeding the hungry, not giving a drink to the thirsty, especially those that are waiting to vote, not welcoming the stranger, not clothing the naked, and not visiting the sick or in prison, and calling anyone who does these things a communist and a traitor. They seem to be remarkably unfamiliar with the teachings and practice of Jesus. In the parable of the Good Samaritan in Luke's Gospel, Jesus does two things. He sets human relationships within the context of the great commandment to love our neighbours as we love ourselves. And he refuses to place limits on the definition of who a neighbour is. He does not say our neighbour is everyone except those of a different nationality or ethnicity. He does not say our neighbour is everyone except those of a different religion. He does not say our neighbour is everyone except those of a different gender or sexual orientation. He tells a story which is characterised by inclusion, and he makes behaviour, not belief, the final criterion of neighbourliness, specifically the practice of kindness. My understanding of our faith is that we will be judged and are judged all the time, not by what we believe, but by how we love. I think this is the message of Jesus, the living word. He scapegoated no one, though he was scapegoated himself. And in a consumerist culture, which strives ever more ardently for the perfect lifestyle, the perfect home, the perfect body, it's curious how, on the contrary, our sexual expectations seem to be getting lower by the day. The dynamics of power play apply across the whole range of sexual orientation, exacerbated by the online world. But what is most noteworthy for me is that anyone should risk so much for such a small return. The business of sexual encounter too often appears like a lousy trade-off. A one-night stand, depersonalised exchange, coerced sexual favours, hostility and contempt. The effect of this kind of deeply unappealing transaction, far from increasing sexual fulfilment, is actually to drain from it everything that is in the least bit erotic. Though there's plenty of appetite around, much of it artificially stimulated to sell us more things we don't need and didn't know we wanted. Real heart-stopping desire seems somehow to be on the wane. Desire, that truly potent alchemy of tenderness and ruthlessness, is awakened by and directed towards someone or something beyond the self, which attracts by its very being and otherness. It's incompatible with the self-referential transaction, requiring as it does the capacity to go beyond itself, and being at its intensest a slow burner is less likely to do well in the one-night stand. But eroticism is not simply a function of sexual intercourse. It's a way of being in the world, which feels passion more than it seeks gratification, and which, since it is also the province of art and philosophy, of gardening and music and playing sports and parenting, in all of these, as in sexuality, is prepared where necessary to sacrifice sensation for the sake of passion. The disciplines of eroticism require an understanding of the value of restraint to fully appreciate release. Self-limitation and letting go are only the two sides of the one coin. And contrary, I think, to conventional wisdom, desire, not morality or law, is the driving force of religion, whether experienced as the attraction of the ultimate other, or more perversely, as the fear of abandonment by that other, which can so easily turn into moralizing or legalism. There is a contemplative eroticism that will never be understood by those who measure sexuality by performance or by those who are afraid of solitude. Perhaps the up for it bravado is really concealing a broken-heartedness over the death of the perfect partner myth. Perhaps our sexuality is being required to carry a too heavy burden of displaced needs for identity, for belonging, for affirmation, which we are not very good as a society at locating properly. Perhaps we have forgotten how to be kind to each other in our sexual fragility. But kindness is a quality of eroticism, so perhaps we would be doing ourselves a favour by revaluing the erotic. We might even find the quotient of sexual delight improving in the process. The bodies of grown-ups come with stretch marks and scars, faces that have been lived in, relaxed breasts and bellies, backs that give trouble and well-worn feet, flesh that is particular and obviously mortal. They also come with bruises on their heart, wounds they can't forget, and each of them a company of lovers in their soul who will not return and cannot be erased. And yet I think there is a flood of beauty beyond the smoothness of youth. And my heart aches for that grace of longing that flows through bodies, no longer straining to be innocent, but yearning for redemption. I love this poem by Janet Morley. Of course, it speaks to my age and stage in life. But it's also a cogent reminder that however fascinating or terrifying our sexuality is, our daily bodily experience is mostly much more mundane, and we are more affected by other realities. By feeling too cold at night, unless you're a Scot, in which case you probably won't be feeling too hot. The acute pain of toothache, or the chronic pain of sciatica, the noisy neighbours, or the exhaustion of over-busy schedules. In dealing with these realities, we look towards a wider range of relationships and intimacies. In our heart of hearts, we know that there is often something lacking in the terms by which we negotiate the meeting of our needs. It's often hard for us to accept our own deepest humanity, hard to affirm intimacy. But the struggles and joys of the parent-child relationship, the patient attentiveness of the carer, the mutual affection of friends, the deep bonds of brotherly and sisterly love, the companionship of many kinds of community and family life, and the mutual acceptance and respect for our frailties are also to be cherished. Give us a God with skin. Not a forgotten God of empty ritual, nor some vague kind of inferred presence. We don't want that indifferent greybeard, nor the frigid bookkeeper, nor capricious wonder worker. We don't want a human choice from a pantheon of our own fears and foibles, our hopes and heroics. Do not try to palm us off with a warm fuzzy, nor to confuse us with some clever theological construct. We need a God with skin, a God who is embodied and earthy, who is washed down lovingly in our birth and anointed equally lovingly in our death. A God who hungers and knows our bodily needs. A God who can laugh and dance, who has played and who knows the importance of rest. A God who can be cared for, who can be touched. We need a God who sweats and blisters from work and from walking, who smells of the crowd and of the marketplace, a God who is leathered with exposure and tempered with tears, a God enfleshed, who will shiver with all our fears and will bruise and bleed under lash and thorn. We need a God who knows our dust, yet whose presence glows with the fullness of life. We need this God beside us, within us, to sustain and unite us. We need this God to assure us that we are not alone, and that yes, our fleeting mortal day is meant and is meaningful. So I think we might take a few minutes now to share something of our experience of the intimacies of our lives. And I don't just mean the partner intimacies, but the relationships that allow us to live in our day-to-day lives, and who accept us in all our physicality. Is that a clear suggestion? Okay, maybe 3 or 4.